begins. The spookiness. Cat's out of the bag. Retheming for the months of September and October. All horror, all the time. I love it. I'm jazzed up because since COVID, Universal has been doing their Halloween Horror Nights for the entire months of September and October every year since, and I'm loving it.
I didn't realize, so they started doing that because of COVID, the whole September.
Yes, because they had to move the lines a lot slower.
Oh, so to like give people, okay.
To have like the 6-foot buffers and stuff, it became kind of a nightmare, so they just like, to give everybody the opportunity to do it, they started doing it for 2 full months.
I didn't realize it was a newer thing.
Yeah, just the 2 months in general.
The 2 months thing, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, like that aspect of it is very new. It's only, they started doing that in 2021, the year, because they skipped 2020. But very cool event. Universal like flips the whole studios park for a haunted house. They literally change it in real time. You can watch them actually pulling out all like the scare zones and everything, and like the food carts and stuff, pumping their signature smell fog in there. It's just nothing.
And take what for someone who's never been there. What's the?
So the parks in general are great. I love the parks to begin with. But on top of that, you literally throw a shroud over the whole park as a giant haunted house. You're living my dream scenario.
just you in a shroud. That's
shroud.
That's your dream scenario.
Yeah, death and people just trying to give you a heart attack. That's my dream. That's the world I want.
That's an interesting world.
He's going to sneeze. I can see it. He's going to sneeze.
I was about to. I stopped.
Nah.
I was just like,
how great is stuffed crust?
I inhaled that. I was so hungry.
Dude, me too. I can't. It's so thick, dude.
It is. I hadn't had it in so long. I forgot.
I'm going to be paying for all this cheese, but right now I don't care.
Yeah. I'm going to be paying for that later. Speaking of horror, yeah, I'm going to be paying. I would be paying for that. That would be a horrible thing.
But yeah, so in the spirit of Universal, embracing everyone.
Retheming for a megathon.
9 episodes with the week count of between October, counted it down, the week count between October and September. We're getting 9 horror episodes, including right now.
Yes. Were you prepared for this? Because I was not.
Yeah, it's happening. I'm not telling anybody what we're doing. I'm not going to roadmap it for everybody.
No, yeah.
I know what we're doing.
I don't even know what we're doing.
I'm not telling you
I don't even know what we're doing. I'm actually the big secret to this whole show is I'm actually tied to a chair.
It's just being held like The Conjuring.
Yeah,
you're under a white shroud, bleeding.
or like a Saw scenario where like I have to do this podcast to survive, or like Crank. It's like I gotta stay at a certain level heart rate, or else I'm gonna go kaput.
But see, then you get to end up with Amy Smart at the end of the first one.
That is a good one. Yeah, that's a good.
Second one, not so much.
I don't think I've ever saw the second.
Oh man, on my Voodoo for one.
Okay,
definitely check it out. It goes it just takes the bat shittery even higher. Even higher. They talked for a long time about making a third one, which, given how the second one ends, is so absurd.
Yeah,
they literally like set him on fire and like throw him. It like they take the ending of the first one and like amp it up like 1,000%. But yeah, neither here nor there. We're going into. I wanted to start this whole retool with like just a general retrospective, because I've talked to a lot of people who don't even like know like the lines between genres, like what distincts, and I get made fun of for some of the things I consider certain genres.
Like what ones do you get?
Like I've said to people before that like we've talked recently like Memento being a noir. Like what do you mean Memento's a noir?
Yeah,
it doesn't even make any sense. I'm like, but it is though. Like it is.
I mean, it definitely follows that same. I would that's when you definite. I mean, even if you don't think it is, I don't think it's a stretch to see how someone could.
It's a detective story for one, but neither here nor there. It's like some things I consider to be horror, other people might consider thrillers. Sometimes those lines, especially with subgenres,
thriller and horror, can
get real
overlap.
Gray.
Yeah,
but so I wanted to ease us in. Let's just get us like a general hoop-de-loop.
Gotcha. Well, how do you? So we're gonna kick off the spoops. The
spoopiness.
The spooktacular season that was upon us. And as we're recording this, there was a chill in the air coming back in. I was quite...
The first bits of fall, baby.
I was like, ooh, I kind of might need a jacket.
It's apt. Yeah. Very apt air and atmosphere. Dig it. But yeah, since we were lately talking, and not to make this the Halloween Horror Nights episode, but you know, you got me thinking about it now, and I'm like, it is a very cool event because like they do a couple of like intellectual property houses. So like they'll do like this year, for example, they're doing Last of Us, which is super cool. They're doing a house based off of a game. I guess it was something with rights that they couldn't do the show.
That's strange.
Yeah, so it's like it is specifically themed off of the game, but it's like they're definitely riding the hype of the TV show
of the TV show.
This year.
Gotcha.
But I don't know if it was something like HBO rights or something.
Yeah, like they can't use their
something
version of it. Gotcha.
But nonetheless, I'm extremely happy to see that house. That's the one I'm super stoked for. They're doing like Exorcist Believer, which that one I'm a little weird about because I'm going to be going in September, so I'm going to be seeing the house before the movie.
Yeah.
So that one I'm like, that's a little against their MO. They don't usually do that. But, and what else are they doing? They're doing Chucky this year, which should be fun.
Yeah.
Should be like, they usually have like a hokey house. Like they did Beetlejuice one year. So like they usually have like a fun house. So I think that's going to be kind of, even though it's a slasher, I think that's going to be, it's going to be a nice blend of like slasher.
It sounds like, I'm assuming it just gets pretty packed, like pretty crowded.
You almost like, so you can
do you have to plan ahead? Do you have to like itinerize?
I'm extremely lucky that I have her. She's the park planner, but without it, it can be very challenging. But the one thing I do recommend if you do it, go for the express passes.
Go for the express passes.
Because you can kind of cut through. You get one shot for each house. You get one pass for each house to cut ahead of each line to the express lines. And usually there's not as many people as like the lines. Like, so you can, if you structure it and plan it right, you can kind of breeze through.
Yeah.
Get through the bulk of the houses in quick shot and then have time to sit in the lines for a couple of your favorites, like ones you might want to do a second time to get a little extra out of. They also, on top of the IP houses that they do write storylines for their own original houses.
Oh,
so
I didn't know they did their. Oh, that's
so. There's usually like, it's often the case that it's 5 and 5 in the years that I've been going. So on that front, it's like it's cool because you get kind of like stuff you like and love, and then you get to try something new.
Yeah,
which I like that balance.
That is, I do like that.
But yeah, I recommend it if you get a chance to go. It's great, especially the food.
Food is good. Do they have something different for horror nights? Like different?
Yeah, they'll do pop-ups like in like the scare zone areas of the park where they'll like have like, usually it's like stuff themed to their IP that they have for that year.
Okay.
Like I know Beetlejuice, they had like a lot of goofy hokey dessert treats and stuff.
Oh, I could see that.
This year for Last of Us, I know they have an alcoholic coffee that's like themed to Fedra.
Oh.
I'm like, okay, I'm in for that. I'm like, I'm going to get in a couple of those. But yeah, so, and the scare zones are cool too. So it's like not even like just the houses. So it's like the streets of the park basically turn into a haunted house too. They have scare actors.
And you're going this year too?
Oh yeah, we're going full time. We haven't missed a year yet since we started going, so I'm trying to hold true to the tradition. Yeah. But good stuff. And on the topic of the genre itself, I mean, I know people that aren't as versed with like the topics of genres. I know some people don't know where those lines tend to draw. Not that they're firm lines, as we said. This can be very gray at times.
Yeah.
Not very clear what is a horror, what is a thriller, what is a horror comedy. Sometimes, especially it gets real gray.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's genre you can do. The cross genre is really what it is. You can blend anything together. Really, it just gets trickier the more you start to blend everything into one.
The more stories you have that fit to multiple examples,
and genre too is, I don't know if it originally started that way, but it is also just a way for us as human beings to organize,
try and categorize.
Yeah, categorize it, and for a way for like a bookstore or video stores don't exist anymore, but places like that.
There is one Blockbuster still.
There is still, yes.
They're holding on.
Just a way to say, okay, this belongs in this genre, but really it's more of a spectrum or a gradient than a hard and fast.
But yeah, so like just to give a bit of preamble to genre in general. Genre in general. I like that. Alliteration. That's tasty.
Is it?
I'm a fan.
No one has it. It's just like no context to that at all.
Nope, not going to give it
I'm
either.
just like, that's tasty. Like, is it? Yep.
It's like tasty treats.
No context whatsoever.
Oh gosh, but
he's drinking an iced tea, by the way.
He's drinking on a. Oh my god!
But
the hammer pulled you off.
The hammer pulled you off. Go ahead.
So yeah, we're just in literature and like the common 5 are like fiction, nonfiction. So fiction is made up, often not real stories, something that didn't happen.
No, yeah, like that.
Narratively is someone came up with, is drawn maybe from inspiration with for real life, but not intended to reflect.
Yeah, genre fiction too is another, like you'll see, like this is where genre fiction would come in. Next to, you always hear like literary fiction too. Like those are the stories that are so different that they gave them their own section too in the bookstore. Even though like Ulysses, like even though that's not that's a much older story, but that could be something is like it's just very different. Doesn't have that sort of mainstream structure that you see in other things like action, horror, comedy, all that. But yes.
Yeah. And then nonfictions, that's like your biographies. In film, often, apart from literature, it can be like your documentaries.
Yep.
Then the other main three in literature are drama, poetry, and folktale.
Folktale's an interesting one.
Your Mark Twain's.
Which can have a horror element in it. It's interesting how when you bring these concepts up, you have the genres, but you can also throw in those elements from it. And create something new. Like we had mentioned before, like you love like the food analogy. You can almost compare everything to food. Yeah.
I was telling you and Jordan about this. I recently got into the show The Bear.
Yes,
off of
you were
FX. It perfectly encapsulates that.
It does. Oh,
perfectly.
okay.
And I recommend that show. Top notch. Yeah, it fits so perfectly because you're working with ingredients, same as you are in filmmaking. It's a very fitting analogy. It's like the perfect blend. There's an artistry to it. Yes, there's like a science aspect to it, but it's the finesse of how you get those elements.
I got
together.
you. Yeah.
And then genres in film are slightly like these are very gray lines between literature. I mean, these all apply across the board, but most commonly 13 genres are typically like main genres are applied in filmmaking is action, adventure, horror, comedy, thriller, western, fantasy, musical, mystery, romance, and often sports, like the
sports story. I got you. Like the
Moneyball, stuff like that.
It always has that underdog sports story.
Yeah. Whatever Mark Wahlberg doing lately.
What is he doing?
Transformers? Oh no, he's out of Transformers.
Yeah.
They're doing other stuff. But yeah, he did a lot. He did a lot of those underdogs.
Wasn't he? What's the one where he plays for the Eagle? Invincible? Is that one he did?
Yeah, because they made fun of that, and it's always
yeah, they did. Yeah.
Oh, that's Marky Mark, dude. So yeah, those are the main ones, and there's a lot of subgenres in between.
But we are here today to talk about
specifically through horror. I wanted to look at like what are the subgenres, like what are some examples.
Not even just today. We're dedicating to horror. We're dedicating
the whole damn.
We're
2 months.
You're Tillis. You're with this until
full bore and into the abyss.
Yeah, until November.
Yeah, I'm booking us. Can't get at us.
Yes,
but yeah. So I
wouldn't want to get at us. I really wouldn't. Go ahead.
I'm pushing them off until they can't. They're gonna have to wait until the family holidays to get us. So the main subgenres of horror. I mean, granted, there are other ones. Some like there's a lot of nuanced genres that have come out in between, and there's even ones there's like crossover. So like there's examples of middle grounds for all of these, but there's like demonic, witchcraft, gore, monster, paranormal, vampire, slasher, zombie, psychological, and comedic. Comedic being one of my favorites.
Yeah,
I love horror comedies.
Yeah, no, and I'm like I immediately think What We Do in the Shadows,
dude,
and like
good.
Shaun of the Dead.
Not like the movie itself for What We Do in the Shadows. Like I love the show, but the movie just hit that pin needle of perfection.
And it's strange too how horror, like where would you like say like horror definitely has a big follow.
Oh my god!
But is it
like we said with Universal? Like going into that park and seeing just how many people go batshit for that stuff. It's like the merchandise rights alone
make us rich
beyond our wildest. The amount of stuff, the amount of T-shirts alone that they pushed through that event, mind blasting.
So that's all you need is you got to just get a T-shirt and sell it.
I'm just gonna put your face on a T-shirt.
Oh,
we'll sell the TSP
no,
T-shirt.
You really want to frighten people? Yeah,
that's horrific.
I wouldn't even buy it.
There's some horrors in this T-shirt. But yeah, so just digging into each one here.
Yeah.
The demonic one is pretty common. It's been common since the 70s.
Well, definitely, The Exorcist is obviously
it's the prime example
of the grandfather of it, I would say, because I can't think of, at least in film, I cannot think of.
It's like the godfather of that subgenre.
Yeah, definitely. I'd even say too of the horror genre in general, because that's one of the few that actually got critical acclaim too.
Yeah,
even
there's a couple though that like since there are so many subgenres in horror, there are a couple that lay that claim to being like the grand poobah of the genre. But they're so different across all these subgenres that it's like, well, it's kind of arguable. Like
which one?
The Shining is a big one that lays claim.
I would definitely put The Shining in the horror.
That's more of a paranormal ghost story kind of deal.
Psychological thing going on because again, it's that back and forth of Jack Nicholson's character kind of descending into madness, or is it really happening?
That's another one that I think The Shining is one of the best examples of one that's like kind of subgenre hopping. It's kind of all over the place with all of this. It's like it is a ghost story, but it's also kind of a psychological where he's losing his mind, going batshit. But it's like he is being influenced by the ghosts of the hotel and the energy of the hotel.
Yeah.
So it's kind of genre hopping.
And I
like that.
I think Kubrick did a big 180 with that, because I've never read the actual book by Stephen King, but I'm under the impression that they are very different.
Wildly different.
Okay.
And Kubrick and King hate each other. They
Oh, really?
hated each other.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Kubrick practically flipped his middle finger right at him.
And just said, yeah. Was
No,
it
he's
because
like-
of like the changes? Was it be over The Shining? Was that?
It was 100% over The Shining.
Oh, okay.
And it was King did not approve like of any of the changes, but Kubrick, in the way that he pushed forward, always locked up the rights for everything that he did.
Yeah.
And nobody could tell him boo, because it was like, nope, I own it. I'm
Yeah.
gonna go do whatever I want. Which, love it, hate it, that's the way the man operated. I think the esteem, if nothing else, of The Shining and the amount of endurance that it has had over the years is testament that he did something right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that one's I do like
Yeah,
The
the
Shining.
demonic one definitely, though. Well, even The Shining, yeah, it does have a demonic thing going on.
A little
with
bit.
it, definitely. I'd say it's the same. I would say that even the demonic thing definitely lends itself to psychological as well. There's a big psychological element.
The big what I usually take it as for demonic is usually like intrusion of hell.
Yeah.
Like is what it usually means for me. Like the ninth gate is like prime demonic.
Yeah.
So it's Evil Dead.
Evil Dead. Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
A big and that's interesting because that blends a lot of comedy into it as well.
Yeah.
Which I knew I was going to say that. I was going to mention that before, and that just reminded me about how they can't the rights to The Last of Us, how they have to use the game, which is totally fine. They have to use the game instead of, they can't get the rights to the movie. I never understood with the Evil Dead. There's the original one. Then there's Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, I couldn't quite understand what was the connection between the two. Are they the same story, or did they remake? Is the second one more of like a reboot of the first one?
That's how I've always taken it.
So apparently, I guess what happened was, and Bruce Campbell has, I think, actually done an interview on this saying, so how it's supposed to work is like you watch all of the original Evil Dead right up to the point then where the Deadite demon comes at him, the famous camera movement that Sam Raimi
love the shaky
did.
cam of the original.
Yeah, the shaky cam of the demon. It's just POV shot that they do attacking Ash, and then it's like, then you would then start Evil Dead 2 right in that sequence, and that's kind of how you're supposed to watch the two of them together, because I guess apparently what happened was when they made the first one, they wanted to do like a recap of it in the second one, like a quick one, but they couldn't get the rights to their own movie,
Which is so weird.
and it's just, so they had to completely just kind of retool it a little bit, and I'm just like, how greedy do you have to be? You want to talk about horror?
Every time I think of it, for some reason, I see the SNL skit where Bill Hader is playing Willem Dafoe. He's like, Sam Raimi is no one's friend.
That's a big one, demonic. Like, there's a lot.
That's one that, like, it kind of is the big. That's why the reason I put that first is it's a lot of ways it can be the all-encompassing one.
Yeah.
Like the other ones touch like more tangential areas of it all, but it's like that's the one that kind of you can really make a case for everything beyond that to some degree. Coming up after that, we have the witchcraft.
The witchcraft, and
That's an easy one. It's like basically there's a witch in it.
Yeah, Hocus Pocus.
Hocus Pocus is a great one, but that's also a comedy too. So you get the
this
roundabout
is definitely a good one to put. I'd say if I was organizing the shelf, I'd put that in there with it.
When I had my physical copies on hand, it's like I always you saw it a couple of times. I kept like rearrange, especially my horror shelf, just kept getting rearranged because no matter what, it didn't feel right.
You have it. No, wait. You have it by genre alphabetically, or do you have it?
Oh man, it was all
alphabetical.
Just horror, or like the whole thing.
The whole thing, like
the whole thing. So I had directors that I was studying.
Yeah.
Then like below that, it was like notable for cinematographers, notable for sound design. Like it was like kind of like the early parts of the early shelves were like, what is this known for?
Yeah.
If it was like a big masterpiece type thing, it was like it sits in a category of what it's known for.
I gotcha.
Was where it would go first. So like my core like study topics would like go that way, but then like I'd go into genres after that. Because like if something was most known for which genre it's in, then it's like okay, then it goes that way. So it's like fell down those rungs as it would come down. But then I was like, I don't even remember where I had horror, because I have like 3 full bookcase. Horror copy. And I was like, I kept like rearranging. I would rearrange it honest to God, like for whatever I was like looking at that genre at that time for. So I would literally just use it as like and organize my head types in it. Like, okay, I want to look at it from this lens. So like, how do I need to like put this in organization? Everybody always say it was like my brain has to be chaos.
Yeah.
Like, honest to God, this is not wrong. like,
yeah, I gotta agree with that.
yeah, witchcraft. Some of my favorite ones are like obviously the A24 Rob Eggers, the Witch, the Double V.
Yeah, the Vivitch.
What's her name? Anna Taylor-Joy.
Is she in that?
She.
I totally. Oh yeah, that's right.
That was one of her earlier ones. She was around before that, but yeah, that's her first big blip. And Blair Witch Project. Blair Witch Project is so interesting.
That is because the way it was shot. Well, especially like I don't
The
even
way it
know
was marketed.
Yeah, I don't even know if you could get. I don't even know if you could pull it off today.
The closest thing that has happened since then was Cloverfield.
True. Yes.
Cloverfield used the internet really well to try and achieve a similar type thing.
It did, and that was J.J. Abrams, right? Or did he just produce it?
He produced it.
Okay.
It's a lot of people attribute him directing that, but it wasn't the case. And I think he did a hell of a job producing that because the marketing strategy for it was top notch.
I remember too, like seeing that and like like just the bits and not knowing like what is happening. It does do a decent job of
Interestingly enough, that falls into one of our other subgenres of monster.
It does.
It's a great twist on that subgenre because it did what Godzilla is now trying to replicate in a lot of their stuff. It's using that perspective camera, using like boots on the ground perspective of like a city demolition. It's like there's a lot of commentary with those types of movies on 9/11 and other such tragic events since. And I think that ones that do that really well are very successful because Gareth Edwards with his Godzilla take top notch.
Perfect. Yeah.
But for the monster subgenre, like Jaws, Quiet Place, one of my all-time favorites, which almost directly precedes Jurassic Park, is Tremors.
Tremors, yes, very good. And that one, and it's strange too, because like the monster movies, it can go kind of two ways in terms of whether it scares you or not.
Yeah,
like
it can
Tremors,
be hokey and fun in a great way.
Yeah, Tremors definitely has a lot of action and adventure in it.
Yeah.
But even though it is a monster movie. Yeah. So
I think Tremors is one of the perfect balanced hokey serious movies. I think it's one of the only ones that have ever perfectly struck that balance.
Yeah. And you can with too, I think there's that primal fear usually in monster movies. There's that primal fear of being eaten alive, like being
especially from things like you can't see.
Yeah.
Like stuff like it did Jaws on land. It was so, so good. I'm trying to think of some other good monster movies. There's a million.
I mean,
creature
like
feature.
Antlers. Technically, I mean, is King Kong or Godzilla still considered like would you put those in the monster
creature
genre?
Feature? You know, is
the Blob, Alien, of course.
Alien's a great example
of the monster movie.
Yeah, we also have gore, which is like stuff like a lot of people. I remember on the mid 2000s, a lot of people would call it porn.
Torture, yeah.
So it was like just shock value of just throwing like the most horrific images possible on the screen. But it's like I saw, while it does fall into that category, like the first one at least was a great thriller on top of it. Like the twist to that, the psychological element.
I will say, that especially too, that hit at a time. I don't know if the gore genre is as big.
Saw was one of the great examples of horror budget working really well. They spent almost nothing on Saw.
Really? The first one?
They spent very little on that. Like it was not what I would call independent budget, but in terms of like studio features, like they pretty much just spent money on the cast and like the crew elements.
Do you think it started off as like a tax write-off idea? Like, all right, we have to spend so much money before the end of the year. Come give me something to.
I don't think it was during the writer's strike, but was it
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember. But it was of that time where it was like it was pitched as like such a small script, but it was done on such a dime, and then it made money on the back end. That's where horror really kills it. Spend no money on the front end. Show like
very little, have
a great script, but like do just what you need, and like the rest will fall into place. And it's that back end return, because you didn't spend as much on the front end, is the money.
Always the dollars.
I think horror is having a big resurgence because of that. I think a lot of studios have realized the market value of horror because nothing on the front end big time wins. Insidious Red Door just proved that in spades. That's what they did. It not to say that it didn't spend, like it was a fairly bigger budget horror movie, but in terms of like blockbusters, it's not spending the hundreds of millions. But there's a lot. I think raw creativity to horror can be its best, because like you're getting people who just want to do it.
And what too, like what would you say defines just horror in general? Like, does it have to be, because if you're always working with suspense and surprise, what makes a horror? What makes something horror?
I think there's a couple of different answers to that.
Yeah.
But I think for what I like out of horror, I like to see characters who are very underdog.
Yeah.
Are trapped in terrible scenarios and trying to fight their way out of it.
Yeah.
Typically, I think a good example of that is the Ring. One of the biggest tropes in horror is the journalist.
Oh, yeah.
The journalist trying to figure out the mystery of what's going on. And I think The Ring is one of the best examples of that because, namely, Watt's character in that is the quintessential horror journalist. I think. But it's also, that movie is shot. I think it's one of the best pieces of cinematography in the 2000s.
I haven't seen that one in a while.
It's so good. Chef kiss. Yeah, the Ring falls into the paranormal, the ghost story. Another great example of that is Poltergeist. We've talked before about the pairing of Ghostbusters and Poltergeist, but I think that fascinating the crew crisscross of that. Because Ghostbusters was so because of Ivan Reitman's own misjudgments about what he needed for time in terms of time and what he budgeted from the studio, he wasn't physically able to deliver on, but trucked through all the same. Still selling his soul or something, got that movie made. And the crew from Poltergeist walked across the street or it was either that or vice versa. I think it was they walked across the street from Poltergeist to Ghostbusters. Literally, there was almost no lag time between the two. That's why a lot of the stuff in Ghostbusters kind of looks like Poltergeist.
So they kept using. Okay,
it's almost the entire same effects crew.
Okay, so they were just working around. They were just right back into it.
Poltergeist was pretty much a tight to the wire schedule to begin with, but then you threw Ghostbusters, which was one of the all-time most craziest post-production schedules ever. They hoofed it, and that movie, both of those movies are gorgeous to look at. How they either one of them got done.
I've always heard, and I've said, the ending sequence with the bodies in the pool trench.
Yeah,
I've heard that those are real bodies instead. They actually got them from an actual morgue or something rather than because it was cheaper to use that.
We'll dig into this more at a later time, but there's so much to the curse of the Poltergeist.
Okay.
But yeah, more on that another time. But the paranormal subgenre, I love it. Ghost stories are some of the oldest horror stories. That's the camp around the campfire ghost story. That's some of my favorite stuff. I went to camp as a kid, worked at camp as a kid, loved sharing ghost stories and scaring the crap out of people. It was the best.
And that's interesting because I've always wondered, is ghost stories, if you think there's a lot of ghost stories that come about in more modern times, if we're saying, and when I say modern times, I'm talking post-industrial revolution, Victorian era up to the early 20th century into the late up to today. So you see a lot of that, especially with all the things that happened in history. Though if you look through back to ancient civilizations, ghost stories definitely exist. It's interesting though how the perspective they take on it.
Yeah.
There's sometimes more of in some of the Celtic mythology stories, there is more of that fantasy element going on, more of that just unknown aspect. So it's there, but it doesn't have sometimes that dread that you feel in watching a modern day horror movie or reading something more modern horror doesn't seem to always be there to me. So I find that interesting. Is our concept of a ghost story different from, say, someone's from 2,000 years ago or something like that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Or the way they would look at a ghost. Obviously, I think anyone looks at a ghost and be like, "Whoa."
One of my favorite things, I've talked to some writers. I know a lot of people who don't believe that, don't think that anything relating to religion is scary anymore, and I think that it can be if you do it right. I think that a lot of the examples that I've been argued with as being not that scary because they're tied to religion. I think that they're not done well enough. The examples that have been argued, and I'm that's not what I would pick to argue it. It's there are some goods. I think The Exorcist holds up.
I do too,
and that one's very much grounded in religion.
Yeah,
but.
I've certainly heard the story that thinking about that. We watched it. I thought that people found it amusing now. It wasn't scary anymore. It was it had become comedic. And I was like, really?
I don't think
comedic?
that at all.
I mean, I don't.
Yeah, personally, I don't know. It's interesting.
It is interesting. Well,
it's too, I know Universal, their horror classics, Dracula, The Creature from the Black Lagoon, Invisible Man, that whole trope. Those, they've tried a couple times to ring those back in and make them modern. And the one that really took off, Johnny Depp was originally supposed to star in it.
Yeah.
Threw it off, but they did remake The Invisible Man, and they took a very almost Marvel take on it.
Yeah.
Where it was they went hard tech on it. And that makes perfect sense for The Invisible Man story. It's it is a almost Jekyll and Hyde science story
going on.
Back when it was made originally, it was very much the Jekyll and Hyde-esque take on it, but there's ways to twist that stuff and pull it in for different ways. If that's like your angle is to modernize it and bring it in, like there's ways to still keep that and amp up that type of terror with it and make it modern. But so I like that falls right in with the vampire, like that the Dracula from Universal Monster Classics, like one of the big, like it's always harkened back to a lot of different stuff.
I mean, that's that, and I see you have the even before Dracula, at least before the film Dracula, I should say, the Nosferatu.
Nosferatu is the grounding for a lot of cinema. Like, not even just the horror genre, but it was one of the first ones to make like that dark imagery, like that like very contrasty image.
Yeah, the high contrast to it. Yeah, you forget there's a lot that you owe today and that you see in movies too. Something like Nosferatu.
And there's ways to, horror doesn't just have value to horror. It's like you can take those elements, those visuals, and apply them to a dark thriller, something else, and not necessarily like for a horror piece, but you can use it in other types of storytelling. That's why I like to watch. Everyone's always like, why do you watch so many different genres? I'm like, because there's so much value for cross-play that people haven't explored. Like,
you go right back to the Last Airbender quote. Like, if you take the knowledge only from one place, it becomes rigid and stale. But if you take it from learning about other cultures, other ideas, helps you become whole.
Exactly. And what a great scene. God, I love that scene.
Yeah. Not to take us off topic.
Sidebar, but it is a great scene.
No. I mean, it essentially encapsulates the whole theme of that series.
Yeah, for sure. What else are we looking at here? Oh, we haven't talked about Slasher yet.
That's a big one. Is it as big though anymore as it used to be?
I think so. Even though Scream is suffering pretty heavily right now, I always say I don't know how I feel about.
Pun intended.
I don't know how I feel about that one being a franchise
anymore,
or at all.
At all being a franchise.
I like the sequels a lot, but it was one of those ones where it's like the first one was The Iron Struck.
Yeah, and
I think it works really well as a not necessarily a parody, but a kind almost satirical of the slasher genre.
Yeah,
in great ways.
Well, that's exactly what it was trying to do, though. Originally, I thought,
and that's why I don't think expanding it out into like a slasher franchise didn't work.
Yeah, when you try to make it, when it's trying to be,
it only amps up that hokiness.
A play on,
I like the Scream franchise. I like the sequels. I just don't know if it ever needed to be a franchise.
Yeah,
I just shared somebody photoshopped Ghostface in a spacesuit, and I was like, nah, that covers it. That's about as hokey as they've become. But there's a lot of contention over slasher that I like, and there's like a lot of arguments I've seen online over what is the first slasher, because a lot of people say Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah,
but that's not necessarily the truth.
What is that?
That's exactly it, though. Is it's so argued.
Well, I'm saying what do other people count?
A lot of people attribute it to John Carpenter's Halloween.
Okay,
and that's a very fair choice. Yeah. But there is a case to be made for Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Even though
did they come out? Well, Texas Chainsaw Massacre came. No,
that's why I was a little hesitant to even put Chainsaw Massacre in that grouping for that reason.
74, I thought I saw it. Yeah.
That's why it's attributed to be in the first one. Because it came first. I thought that was the case. I just wanted to prove it. Depose myself in front of America.
Depose yourself. Do it now.
Do it. Put the shackles on.
Come on, I'm here.
Come on, shackle me.
I'm here. Kill me.
Interestingly enough, I always forget this, but Tobe Hooper, who did Poltergeist, even though everybody always thinks that Poltergeist was Spielberg because he is attached to the producer.
I think he helped produce it, right?
Yeah, and it does have that Spielberg flair to it. But yeah, interesting.
So why do people argue then that Texas Chainsaw Massacre is not?
Because it's not a singular like
why doesn't it fit
Leatherface the mold? Leatherface isn't really like the typical slasher villain. It's like that's that family affair kind of like
because there's multiple. It's the whole
Hills
family.
Hills have eyes. So it's not like one central kill. Like that's where it kind of gets a little gray.
Yeah.
Even though Leatherface does fit in a lot of ways, being like the slasher villain type, there are other elements at play that can be argued against it being like a traditional slasher. Now, like we've said, there's a lot of subgenre grayness, and Chainsaw Massacre was like ahead of the curve of like the whole slasher craze of the 80s like went nuts, especially after Halloween. Everybody wanted to be Halloween. Friday the 13th was created
Friday the 13th
and created entirely on just the studio trying to have their own
slasher. Like it's almost like they've got this, we got to have almost how everyone like chased the Marvel phase in recent
so it was
or the universe phase, I should say.
There are some horrors in this house. Okay. Where were we? Oh, slashers. Nightmare on Elm Street, like Freddy, obviously.
Big slasher,
all those 80s slashers were like, that was the big craze. Like in the 80s, and horror was slashers for the most part.
Yeah, definitely.
Not obviously entirely, but that was like the big draw. That's what everybody wanted to see, especially after Halloween kicked off right before the 80s hit. And then Shining has its arguability as being a slasher, even like the axe portion at the end. So like it was Shining kind of played into so many different horror subgenres that it's all things all the time. But yeah, so like that was part of launching into the 80s with the whole slasher craze. And we've been talking horror like Universal classics. Those literally span the scope of these subgenres.
Would you put this is kind of interesting. I'm thinking now. Would you put The Thing in slasher, or would you put it in monster? Or?
I would put The Thing in monster, but it also kind of it's.
I mean, obviously, the gut thing is to go monster genre. With
it most easily fits into monster,
but I feel like if you have that, it is technically a singular killer going around.
Yeah, another great subgenre is zombie.
Zombie, yes.
We were talking Last of Us coming up for HHN. I think Last of Us is one of the coolest zombie stories because it's literally grounded in real science, could very easily actually happen. I think it's one of the scariest.
No, yeah, definitely. But if you've never seen Last of Us or played it, I
do recommend the game.
Yeah.
Any way you can access it, it's a great story. But no, I dug Pascal and the whole cast, the great picks. But yeah, Craig Mazin did a great job with that series. I mean, he did a great job with Chernobyl too. I mean, if I was going to pull in anybody,
Chernobyl has like a horror element to it.
I think Chernobyl is one of the great real world. I think it's the only real world example of an
H.P. Lovecraft.
H.P. Lovecraftian horror.
Lovecraftian.
I think it's the only real world example of Lovecraftian horror that ever actually happened.
Yeah.
So it adds the level of terror to that concept because it's something that was real, and it's probably the only example of it. That's why I think it's a great series because it has horror elements, but it's also literally based on real world history. I think the way that show is written is perfect because it actually shames you for not knowing about it.
Yeah.
In a great way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love that show. But they brought him in. He did a great job with the show as well for Last of Us. 28 days later, now they're continuing that on now. Allegedly, at the time
28 months now?
Killian has said that he's on board to, whenever they do it, that he would do it. They're allegedly trying to get Danny Boyle and Alexander Garland, who wrote the script. But if Danny Boyle won't do it, Alex Garland said he will direct it. It's interesting. Actually, I was just rewatching that today. I love that.
Yeah.
DV cam usage, the strategic way they shot that.
That's definitely one of those. Do you think it's still now, like even like the zombie genre? Do you think even that is still? I think it still was popular. When 28 Days came.
I think when 28 Days Later came out, it boosted that genre 1,000% because it added up until that point, zombies were always kind of like lumbering along. You could easily avoid them. They weren't like
Night of the Living Dead.
I love Night of the Living Dead. I loved being from Pittsburgh. I love George Romero.
Yeah. Hey, don't compare me to you.
Don't lump me in with you.
Don't lump me.
But I think 28 Days Later breathed new life into that genre. Right?
Yeah.
There's been a lot of boost in the 20 some years for that genre, especially like I think Last of Us is a case in point that there is a lot going on with that genre. But yeah, there's what else we got. We guess that the psychological one is an interesting one. It's not that one's a little tougher to define, I think, because a lot of the times you can argue it as a slasher. But I think my favorite example of this was Misery.
That's a good one
because it's like Kathy Bates is going bad. It's not like he's being chased around the whole time like a slasher trope. It's just like he's trapped in this scenario and he can't get out of it, and it's all mind.
I would even throw into the one that I'm thinking of now. I just lost. Oh no, the Babadook.
The Babadook. I love the Babadook. Great Australian movie.
Yeah, I would put that in the psychological.
I can see that. Yeah, because it is like kind of like that storybook.
Yeah.
You could also argue it as a ghost story.
Yeah, make it a ghost story as well. I mean, there's always going to be that overlap no matter what.
Yeah, but I think that one's interesting from the lens of a psychological.
Yeah,
and then I put The Shining in there because I didn't know how else to put it.
No, Shining is definitely, like we talked about earlier, is definitely a psychological.
I think it's the most fun being in that category because like Jack Nicholson going snapping and going bad shit is one of the best parts of that.
I would even more recent. I'd put the Haunting series on Netflix, like
Haunting a Hill House
and Blind Manor.
They're doing another one.
Oh yeah, they're doing Fall of the House of Usher.
Fall of the House of Usher. Yeah, I really liked the last one. Great. I was hoping they were going to do that for HHN, but it did. They did a great house for Haunting a Hill House. It was my favorite year that they did it. But I think it was the same year they did Beetlejuice. Was a great year.
Yeah,
they're all great years. Creator, forgive me.
Sean Flanagan.
Yes. Mike Flanagan.
Mike Flanagan. Thank you.
Between the two halves of a whole
See,
idiot.
the two of us working together could do the work of one man.
I love horror comedies. I could watch probably my most rewatchable genre.
Yeah, definitely.
Beetlejuice. And like
Shaun of the Dead.
Yes, Shaun of the Dead. But I was thinking, what's his name from Back to the Future? Christopher Lloyd.
Yes.
In Addams Family as Fester.
Oh yeah.
All-time favorite performances.
Yep.
So funny.
I'm due for a rewatch for that.
Both of those movies. They made the Addams Family and the Addams Family Values with that same group. Both those movies are gold. Yeah. And it all boils down to in my opinion, the dynamic with Raul Julia, Christopher Lloyd, their brother relationship, and both of those one of my all-time favorites. Some of my all-time favorite comedies. Also, Christina Ricci as Wednesday.
Yeah. Did you put the Munsters in?
I should. I was gonna put them in. Actually, I don't even know why I didn't write them in. But
I see it because I always would when I was little. I would sometimes they would overlap in my mind, the Addams Family and the Munsters.
Yeah, and Rob Zombie just not recently, but within recent years, came out with his take on it. Which I dig Rob Zombie. A lot of people hate Rob Zombie. A lot of people hate Rob Zombie's Halloween takes.
Oh yeah, when he did that. Yeah,
I'm not gonna take a firm stance.
No, but here's my thing: is like, and I mentioned this before. You gotta do something new.
You gotta do something.
You gotta give it your own.
For $45, you gotta tell me something.
It's very hard, and that's why, like, I would just say come up with something, because trying to redesign something that's so ingrained in the grand consciousness of everyone, it can be hard to challenge that, because you look back on it fondly. It's never going to be exactly as it was.
Yeah.
So that's why I always encourage try and make like something new, or tell your own story.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, because I do remember seeing I'm not a big Halloween fan. The movie, they're great movies. I'm not as into.
Get out of my house.
Oh, all right.
I'm just kidding. Put him back.
No. No. I'm just saying I never got into them as much as other people. That's all. I do like them.
I have two.
Same with like the Friday the 13th and the Freddy movies.
I have two very strong opinions about Halloween. Firstly, I love the first one. The first one is a genuine classic piece of horror.
Yeah.
Gold. Critically, don't like the others as much, but the horror nerd inside me
is like, why not?
Who grew up watching the hokey bullshit on AMC Monster Fest all through October. Yeah. I lived for that. So there's like, I have two sides to
See, I was too scared to watch them.
Dude, Horror Fest was my shit.
Yeah, I was too scared to watch this stuff. I just couldn't.
I ran from the bus stop to my house so that I'd miss Dr. Giggles premiering on AMC Horror Fest.
I was afraid of the Yips and the Muppets.
Yeep.
Yeah, it was just the way they looked. Like, so there's where I'm coming from. It took me a little while. I had to grow into the horror movies as I got older. So when I was little, I couldn't, even when I was like 11 or 12, it took me till I got to like 15, 16, where I was like, okay, I think I can do this now.
Yeah. I lived for horror movies as like a way too young of an age. I grew up in a house. I was allowed to watch Terminator 2 when I was like 10 years old.
Oh yeah. Which is strange to me. It's like, I've said this, I think I've said this before in a past episode, I'm not sure, but I always find it strange that I was allowed to watch something like Terminator 2, which has...
But I wasn't allowed to watch Power Rangers because it was too violent.
It has tons of violence.
I still don't understand it.
I could watch... Seinfeld, which has a lot of innuendo.
Yeah.
Stuff that would go over my head. But
definitely wormed its way into your psyche.
The moment, like even some of these horror movies, like just the sheer just malignant quality of like some of like the things that can happen to the people in them.
Yeah.
But the moment there's a nude scene,
turn it off.
Yeah. It's like, I always found that very strange that I can watch someone being like destroyed to pieces, ripped apart.
Context, my man. It's like
someone's being taken into madness.
It's the Joker argument in Dark Knight.
Yeah,
as soon as one little old Mary.
Yeah, once the plan goes awry.
Yeah,
not that I'm advocating
it's fitting in a horror movie.
I'm not advocating that we have more nude and sex scenes and stuff.
But it's
I just always found that strange that like
the tabooness of particular things,
the tabooness of nudity as opposed to the non-tabooness of sheer utter violence,
slamming a dude dude down on a buzzsaw on
Yeah.
the table and then like splitting him in half.
The sheer utter that was always strange to me, and horror does not have to be violent to be scary.
Exactly. Like The Ring is a great example. Like it's all psychological, paranormal. Like, it's what you don't see. It's the Jaws effect. It's what you don't see that can be the scariest.
Too, and getting into like we're thinking like horror too. A lot of the horror stuff I grew up with were video games.
Yeah.
Too, like Resident Evil was a big one for me. And
zombie genre.
Yeah, right in the zombie genre. And
that was like the 90s propellant of zombies, I would say.
I think so too. Even though like they're not necessarily they are one of the main bad guy villains in one in every iteration of the game.
Yeah.
But there's others. So like I wouldn't say it's like strictly zombies because you got other monsters going around. But that is definitely
that's what it's like.
That's definitely going. It's definitely going for that.
Yeah.
That another one. It definitely that one definitely propelled. That was my first introduction to the concept of a zombie.
Yeah.
I did not know what it was until that. Even though if I go back and play it now, the very original one, even though the graphics are not nearly as good as I remember them, it still has that. There's still that charm to those original blocky early 3D graphics going on. There's but like Last of Us had that game definitely has. I think though I owe a lot of video games to like the horror genre, helping me like learn more about the horror and getting me sometimes into it.
Yeah, you really did kind of come into through gaming now that I'm thinking back on it.
Yeah, I came more into the horror genre through gaming. Did you ever play the Fatal Frame series? That's a great horror video game. No. Go ahead.
I was going to say one of my all-time favorites. I actually found out about it. It blew up in the YouTube craze, but the game series Outlast.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Horrifying. I played a lot of it like up till like 2 a.m. in the dark by myself, like shitting myself.
Literally, you had a bucket.
Yeah, I had the Fortnite gamer setup with the toilet seat around a Home Depot bucket.
No, it's interesting to think how much the horror genre influences.
Going off of the horror comedy thing, even just this year we had Renfield. Coming off of the heels of the horror classics. It's like a reinvention, a comedic reinvention of the Dracula tale from it's meant to be like a direct sequel to the Dracula of like the way back in the day.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is genius. Like if I was going to continue Dracula, this is the way I would do it. This is genius. I mean, it has its lifeblood.
But yeah, no, definitely. I take back a little bit of what I said, though.
Take backs.
No, I'm taking it back. Because video games, yes, absolutely. I wasn't lying. I have a very strange memory.
Yeah.
Are You Afraid of the Dark was my introduction.
I love Are You
I don't know how I forgot that.
Are You Afraid of the Dark is kind of Twilight Zone for kids.
Yes. The Snick episode. I lived. You were saying you lived for the horror fest going on. That every weekend, Saturday night, Snick.
Yeah.
I had to watch Are You Afraid of the Dark, but I had to watch Ren and Stimpy to get to it. I was not a Ren and Stimpy fan for some reason.
That surprises me that you are not a fan of Ren and Stimpy.
I am now because because a lot of the stuff was going over my head back then.
Yeah.
But I could not stand the gross out humor of it.
There was a lot of that.
But there was a lot of that in the 90s. That gross out humor stuff was like everywhere.
Cow and Chicken was very much that. Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah. Rocko's Modern Life, which I still love. That wasn't quite as bad.
The random ass like just deadpan and then just a fart noise in the background.
Yep.
It still makes me laugh.
But yes, Are You Afraid of the Dark was definitely my gateway. My gateway into
the intro alone for Are You Afraid of the Dark. Still,
it's still so good.
I love it.
And there are still some of those that can get a little scary and creepy. I mean, that's the point.
The ones that they shot in they shot a couple different episodes in that amphitheater, like almost like the Benedum.
Yeah.
And it was like those ones always like really creep me out because it was always like a ghost story or like something like you realized there was a ghost after
there was one. There's an episode. There's so many episodes that stick in my mind. There's one where there's this ghost that comes out of the walls. There's this one where there's a fire ghost one where like if you
remember
stare,
that one.
Yeah, like a fire ghost will come out if you stare at the flame for too long.
Yeah.
And so like I couldn't stare at open flames or candles. When I was like, no, don't look at it. Don't look at it. There was always the one with, there's one with the, like, it was one of the earlier episodes. There's the clown episode.
The clown ones were creepy.
Yeah, there's that. There's a lot of, that's a good thing. I don't know where you can watch it anymore.
Oh, I have it. It's on my Vudu.
Oh yeah, you could just watch it. Just get in Brian's Vudu and watch it.
Everybody's in there anyway. In all seriousness, though, I think almost every episode, if not every episode, is up on YouTube for free.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
I'm
I'll
almost
check
positive.
that out.
Yeah,
because that is something I definitely thoroughly enjoyed, and the whole like anthology of it, how it was the reoccurring like themes, but the stories were always being told by the Midnight Society and
submitted for the approval of the submit.
What were they throwing on there?
I assume it was just gunpowder.
Is that what? This is like some magical, like
mystic.
Yeah, is this like? But yes, I always enjoyed that. My all-time favorite episode, though, and I still remember it, is, I don't know if there's a the or not, but the Dead Man's Float.
Dead Man's Float.
I
love Dead Man's
Ryan Gosling is actually in that movie.
He was in a couple.
Yeah,
of them,
and so is Jay Baruchel. He's in it, and it's essentially the story of like this ghost. This is why I couldn't learn to swim when I was little, because I was so afraid of being pulled under and drowning. But it's a ghost that lives in a high school pool and drowns people.
It's a great concept.
And I love the outfit that they gave to the ghost when it finally appeared. Mm-hmm. It's just this, I don't know. It blew my balls off as a kid. I just was like, I loved it. I was just, this is amazing. So yeah, take with that what you will. But yes, Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Love that show.
Definitely a big.
That was one of my big early inspirations.
Yeah.
For stuff like I love that show.
That was definitely
that, I think, Twilight Zone.
Yeah,
I love that anthology.
Yeah, and that got me my interest into storytelling. I think just the way
it was like
the fact that it's framed by
it's also like it like we talked
a
before,
group of people telling a story to each other over a campfire. That
we were talking earlier
before.
like the just the campfire ghost story, like being like one of like the cardinal forms of like horror storytelling is like they encapsulated that feel in like an actual. It was genius what they came up with that for that show.
So simple yet so
elegant. So Midnight Society.
Yeah.
So yeah,
so I'm looking forward to this horror journey you got us going on.
We're gonna be diving down the spiral. I think horror is a great genre because it is this very much, as we said, it's the lifeblood of independent cinema, where a lot of people get their, like, I know a lot of makeup effects artists get their start there. Some of the contacts I've met in filmmaking, like I've met through just dumb 48-hour projects or dumb or whatever have you. Like I've learned a lot of lighting techniques, a lot of stupid, simple, cheap ways to do things quick and efficiently on stuff like that. And, you know, I think horror fuel, like the draw of horror fuels a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I hope it sticks around forever because I love that genre so much.
Definitely.
God, what's his name from Chernobyl?
Oh, no, that's not it. That's not his name.
That's not his name.
That's not his name. I can see it. Zion or something like.
I keep wanting to say Clint Mansell, but I'm like, nah, that ain't it. He was serious. Craig Mazin.
Yeah,
that guy.